Good morning. I need to address two very obvious demands that confront us as we continue to make this extraordinary and harrowing journey through the pandemic. They are emergence and resilience, especially financial resilience. In doing so, I want to bring you one word and two challenges. That one word is very simply thank you. A massive thank you to you all and to all the church leaders and the people of God across the diocese, as well as the staff in the diocesan office, for the effective and sacrificial ways you've responded in ministry through this demanding time thus far. Yes, there have been hiccups, but much of the feedback suggests that though our church buildings have regrettably been closed, the Church of God has been very much open for business, offering contextual worship, meeting the needs of the isolated, the vulnerable, the sick, and the sorely grieving. And in addition, we've been reaching literally thousands of those beyond our core congregations, those on the fringe, the non-churched, and the simply curious who seem to have dropped in on our online offerings in recent weeks. So thank you, and please pass on that thanks to others. But now, let me turn to the challenges of the future, both the immediate and long term. How should we, as the Church of God, begin to emerge from this time? It's been a liminal time for all of us as we've responded to the anxieties, grief and need of the last weeks. In the midst, I believe God has been reforming us to be sent back into a different world, the new normal as it is being called. We must not get back to the same old, same old. We need to ask ourselves, what have we learnt and how have we been transformed for the kingdom mission that God is calling us to as we re-emerge into that new normal. In Matthew's Gospel, chapter 13, the evangelist sums up Jesus' teaching in a series of kingdom parables with these words in verse 52. He said to them, "Therefore, every teacher of the law who has become a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storeroom new treasures as well as old." New treasures as well as old. As we prepare to emerge phase by phase, we need to discern which old treasures we should retain from before lockdown and which new treasures we have found during these last creative weeks. Response to that challenge will vary according to context, culture and location, of course. The old treasure will include the opening of our sacred spaces, our beloved and longed for church buildings once again, though I recognise that not all of them quite are so beloved. Amongst the new treasures to embrace will be new people, new connections on and offline, and new worship and mission possibilities. Prayerful and courageous decisions will be essential about what not to resurrect from the past, that which has sapped our energies and our resources, and those projects which maybe are relatively inconsequential in our mission and ministry. In terms of old treasure, our good relationships with many civic authorities have been crucial in partnering effectively to meet local needs during the pandemic. We must retain and indeed enhance those relationships and also foster the new partnerships that have been forged recently with other key community groups. The principles of community organising and our increasing engagement with Citizens UK will surely assist us in that. And can I encourage you, specifically at this time, to consider signing the Citizens UK petition for a real living wage, at least a real living wage, for all social care workers. The health crisis has revealed the iniquity of the low pay of these treasured key workers in our midst, who have given so much sacrificially of themselves. Our pastoral care has never been so widespread and diverse. Our proximity, the new buzzword, both geographical and virtual, has come to the fore. People in the streets around our churches have been looked after, and others have connected in surprisingly large numbers online. Again, we need to follow through on those pastoral connections, pointing people to the Lord Jesus Christ and continuing to serve their needs. Led by the Archdeacons of Harlow and Stansted, our Bishop staff team is developing an emergence strategy which outlines some of our intentions as a diocese, as well as encouragements for local response. It will include emergent strategies on inequalities amongst us. It will be available soon. In the light of the horrendous death of George Floyd in Minneapolis and the subsequent outrageous actions by those with authority and power in the USA, we must again look to our own issues regarding personal and structural racism in our churches and in our communities as we prepare for a new world. Supportive words on this are not enough. We must also act more effectively. Let me turn now to the second major challenge, our resilience as a diocesan family. Resilience, of course, overlaps with emergence, missionally and pastorally, but I need to focus specifically on financial resilience. We all know that we are about to enter a period of significant financial restraint across our national life, especially for the many of the lowest paid and in the gig economy who've already lost jobs and their livelihoods. Recent media articles and data have made it clear that Newham, in our own diocese, is the hardest hit borough in the country in terms of the connection between poverty, poor accommodation, and high rates of the virus cross-infection and death, and disproportionately so amongst our BAME communities. How are we to respond as the church in those rural, coastal and urban communities where the contrast between rich and poor is becoming stark? As a diocese, of course, we were under some financial constraint before this pandemic set in, due to an increasingly poor parish share take-up and collection. As you will know, the issue was to be looked at and debated in our March Synod, which wasn't to be. But the pandemic closures are in danger of exacerbating that financial constraint further through diminished parish share collection as our buildings have been shut, and the interruption of income streams from hall hire, for instance. That is why our 3 mission and ministry advisors have been working so hard during lockdown to contact parishes and especially treasurers and encourage regular parish share payment, and also to turn members towards electronic and standing order giving who haven't done so in the past. The Archdeacon of Barking has now joined them to prepare a strong lead on stewardship uplift across the whole diocese to include training and teaching on sacrificial proportionate giving in the year to come. The paradox is that while some are struggling financially severely, for others of us, this time of lockdown has had the reverse effect. Our pay and our pensions have been maintained. We have spent less due to the restriction and have therefore become a little richer. I myself am in that category. It is incumbent upon those of us in that position to consider the most generous response going forward. From those to whom much is given, much will be expected. Isn't it time to give less rather than more? Some people will be thinking and saying. I'm unashamed to totally disagree and issue the challenge to all of us to consider our financial contribution to our parishes and Christian networks afresh. In the New Testament, the youngest and the poorest churches seem to be the ones who gave the most generously. And that was my parish experience too, in disadvantaged parts of Nottinghamshire. Yes, some amongst us will need to give less, but others can afford and should afford to give more. I wonder if you realise that if 20,000 of the 30,000 church members in our diocese gave just £1 extra a week, it would really begin to resolve our financial need. £2 extra would solve it, just 1 cup of coffee a week. £5 extra would transform our mission capacity and enable us to deploy more clergy and lay leaders. That is the simple reality. It isn't really, for many of us, that big an ask, although of course it is for some others. In Exodus chapter 36, we pick up the end of the story of extravagant giving from the people of God who were in the worst place, struggling through the desert to get into the promised land. They brought out their treasures at the request of Moses and under the call of God to equip the church for its worship and mission as they constructed a tabernacle. In the end, they gave so generously that Moses had to say, "Stop! You've brought more than enough." It's a matter of discipleship. My prayer is that God's people in the mighty Diocese of Chelmsford, as our previous leader often called it, will give, in the words of Genesis 36:5, more than enough for doing the work that the Lord has commanded to be done. Those words, more than enough, I want you to take away, pray on, ponder and pass on to others. Especially we consider those words in the rest of our agenda today as gospel leaders in this diocese. We need to be a mighty diocese in giving. And as the man said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The challenge of Christian giving, whether it's about offering our time, talents or money, always concerns the response of our hearts to the eternal and total love of the Lord Jesus, who gave everything for us. The future is in our hands. Will we bring out treasures old and new for the future and give more than enough to resource the mission that God is calling us to across East London and Essex? That's the challenge. That's the message to take back to our Christian communities and live out in our own discipleship. Some last words of thanks. Though of course not present, I'm sure you would want me to record our thanks to Joel Gowan, our previous Chief Executive, and Philip Need, our just retired Director of Ordinance, for their sterling work and faithful commitment on our behalf. We of course had plans to do that more fully and personally at the March Synod, but it was not to be. Also, my personal thanks to the Bishop's staff team, and especially to Roger Matthews, who has changed chairs to become our interim Chief Executive, and to Maureen Cole, who has joined us as Chief Operating Officer, with a wealth of expertise and experience to bring to the table, already making a difference. This is a huge team effort across the leadership of the diocese, both centrally and locally in our parishes, for which I, for one, am so grateful to God. Thank you for your attention.